What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. The top 10 projected players for the 2019 fantasy football season. Guys, I am finally done the projections. They took a ton of time, but they're done. And the filters are all set up, so as soon as news comes out, we are going to have updated projections. Can we get 300 likes? I'm going to push it up this time. Can we get 300 likes? Because that took a long time to make, and I'm very excited to finally release them. So 300 likes would absolutely make my day. But before we start this video, let's do the stat of the day. Today's stat of the day: among all tight ends with at least 75 receptions, who had the least yards per catch? So the lowest yards per reception among all tight ends in 2006 with at least 75 receptions. This is in one season. So in a season, this dude had 75 receptions. Who had the lowest yard per catch among tight ends? And with that, let's get into this video. So I will be showing you guys my top 10 projected players and what their projections are. Of course, we know that these projections are going to change as the summer goes on, but as of right now, this is what I have. If you want my full projections and the updates as they come out, then head on over to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Become a premium member. It is the single cheapest premium package in the entire industry, while giving the most high quality information. So, before I show you guys my projections, I want to tell you just a little bit from like a high level perspective of how they were made. I'm not going to go into every single detail, but in general, these are how my projections are made, and really they're just how projections are made in general. So I start with the overall production and volume of that offense over the last two seasons. This is a weighted average. Some teams, maybe it's half and half. Some teams, and maybe I weight 80%, like the Cleveland Browns. I have like 80% weight towards last season and 20% towards the season before. So we'll start with that overall production and that overall volume, and I determine any positive or negative adjustments that need to be made. So if there's a coaching change, if there's a new offensive coordinator, if there's a new quarterback, things that are going to change the touchdown production, things that are going to change the play production, like how many plays are run, I adjust for those. I have filters for those things. Then, just set the target shares and the carry splits, and the projections are made using historical data mixed with even more filters I have for positive or negative regression. So if we have a season like Deshaun Watson did, when he had 9.1% touchdown rate, well, I'm going to regress that down because that's not going to happen over a full season, and then it didn't happen over a full season. So things like that, where guys are more or less productive than they should be in a certain category, I just adjust that to reflect what it should be over the long haul. So that's the Cliff Notes version of how these are made. But let's get into the results. So this is for PPR scoring, the top 10. I wanted to include some wide receivers in this. And it's only for skill position players. So I didn't want, half this list to be quarterbacks, because quarterbacks typically score, or at least have some of the highest projections. So at number 10, we have Julio Jones, projected for 99 receptions, 1,420 yards, 7.5 touchdowns, and that's good for 291 PPR points. Julio has shown to have a massive target share as long as he can stay healthy. And you're like, oh, well, yeah, Julio has all these injury problems. He's been healthy. That's the thing. Like, Julio gets a bad rap for these injuries, but he's only missed 3 games over the past 5 years. And you say, Calvin Ridley, he's going to take a lot of targets away. Julio had the second most targets of his career last season with Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley's presence doesn't really affect Julio, and with 5 consecutive seasons over 1,400 yards, Julio's a steal at his current ADP. So he's the 10th highest projection, and he is not going inside the top 10 in drafts. Next we have Juju Smith-Schuster, 104 receptions, 1,357 yards, and 9 touchdowns, which is good for 3 more points than Julio. With AB gone, I have Juju for a 25% target market share. And honestly, that might be conservative. He had a 24.5% target market share last season with Antonio Brown. So could you bump that to 26, 27%? Absolutely. And that'll just push his receptions, into that 110, 111, 112 range. So he's extremely safe. I'd be surprised if he ended up less than 25% target market share. And the dude's still just 22 years old. He's set up for a monster season. So I have him as my wide receiver 6 right now. But I honestly might need to move that higher. Like, I looked before making this video, and it's really difficult because that top 6 is just really good for wide receivers. You can't really go wrong with any of them. But I might have to find a way to move him higher, because even in this is a conservative projection, he comes up with the 9th highest rating of any skill position player. So he's going in the early second round right now. Virtual lock to return value at that spot. At 8, a surprise. At least to me, it was a little bit of a surprise. Travis Kelce, projected for 100 receptions, little over 1,250 yards, and 11 touchdowns for basically the exact same amount of PPR points as Juju. And he just had a few decimal points. I rounded all of these things, so he was a few decimal points higher. And like I said, this is a little surprising to me. I knew that he'd obviously have the top tight end projection, but I did not think he'd have the 8th highest projection of any skill position player. Realistically, though, if you look at the pass catchers behind him, it's Watkins, who, let's be real with ourselves, is unlikely to stay healthy for the full season. A rookie, Mecole Hardman. Demarcus Robinson, who's never been over 290 yards. How do you even pronounce this dude's name? Garage? I don't even know. I'm just going to guess that it's Garage Dierter? I have no idea. But let's be honest, what are we expecting from him? And Marcus Kemp. And then the running backs, who, you guys know I love Damian Williams, but where are the targets going if they're not going to Travis Kelce? So I have him with a 27% projected target market share. Guys, he's a tight end. He's projected to outscore the next best tight end by 60. And he's projected to outscore the tight end 6 by 130. The tight end 6. And there will be weeks, if you take Kelce, where you're going up against the tight end 13 because of injuries or because a guy waited on tight end. That is scary. I usually shy away from taking tight ends early. I try and get some of the middle guys or maybe a late guy I like. But Kelce gives you such a massive advantage over your opponent each week that, this projection shows that you can take him in the late first round if you really want to. And if you're in a tight end premium league, oh my goodness. Mid-first. You could take him in the mid-first in a tight end premium league. If you guys don't know what that is, it's just, it's essentially let's say a half-point PPR league, but then you get an extra point or an extra half point if you have a tight end. So your tight end just gets more points per reception than all the other players. But Kelce coming in at number 8 with an absolutely monster projection. At number 7, Davante Adams. Another guy with 100 receptions, 1,200 yards, and a little over 13 touchdowns. Good for 300 PPR points. Adams continues the trend that we're looking at. Who are wide receivers that have a massive target share? Allison and Marquez Valdes-Scantling will take targets away. We know that that's going to happen. But Adams is the offense. We had a 27.5% target market share last season. I see it being around there again this year. The touchdowns, of course, could come down. That touchdowns are a little bit random, but they're not random when you're playing with Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers typically throws the guys he trusts in the red zone, and he's shown that he trusts Davante Adams more than anyone. I know that you can look at Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham had a ton of targets inside the 10-yard line, and he converted none of them, which, randomness that can bump up to 5-6 touchdowns this year. Doesn't matter. To me, Davante Adams is a safe pick this season. So perfectly good with him. I don't remember what I have him ranked overall, but it's either 1 or 2. I always flip-flop between him and Hopkins. But as you will come to find out, Hopkins is not on this list. Hopkins does not have a top 10 projection. I don't remember where he is because I only looked at the top 10 for making this video. But something to think about, that the touchdowns are a little bit more secure with Davante Adams. At 6, James Conner. 280 carries. A little over 1,250 yards, 13 touchdowns with 65 receptions, 565 rushing yards, and 1.2 receiving touchdowns. Good for 333 points. So we see the jump. We see the 7th highest projected being Davante Adams at 300 PPR points. 6th highest projected James Conner at 333. And this is the point where I don't want to do spoiler alert, but there are no more wide receivers, there are no more tight ends on this list. This is where I'm looking at and I'm saying, you got to take running backs that are projected for this many more points, especially being running backs, and they're being more valuable than hitting on wide receivers, even in full point PPR leagues. This gap just widens at a half point and is a chasm in standard leagues. The Steelers have talked about 2-back sets with Connor and Samuels, and they did draft Benny Snell in the 4th. The thing for me is Samuels and Snell are both unproven. Anyone who says they're not unproven is lying to you. They're unproven. And the Steelers have shown that They are not going to use multiple backs. They are going to use one feature back. That's what they've shown over their entire history. That is what they have shown us. So while Connor isn't the most athletic running back in the world, he's a great fit for this offense, really, because, any running back with a pulse is a pretty good fit for this offense. It's a great offense, and they utilize the running back perfectly. But he's put up numbers on par with and sometimes better than Le'Veon Bell. So is he the safest of the top 6 of the next 5 guys I'm going to talk about, plus James Conner? Is he the safest? No, he's the least safe, because there is a chance where he regresses, and there is a chance that they do these, 2-back sets. But if they stick with one running back, this projection shows he's going to crush it. So let's move into the top 5, and you guys know who these top 5 are, but the order, is tough. You're sitting there with a 1 through 5 pick, and the order is pretty difficult sometimes with how these projections turn out. Some people have Zeke at 1, some people have Kamara at 1, some people have McCaffrey at 1, Barkley, David Johnson. I haven't seen one with David Johnson. But those other guys, some of them have him at 1. And so I think this part is really cool in seeing how these projections separate. So at 5, we have Ezekiel Elliott, 295 carries, a little over 1,375 yards with 7.5 rushing touchdowns, plus 74 receptions for another 630 yards and 3.1 receiving touchdowns, good for 338 PPR points. Zeke showed us last season that he is capable of a large target share on top of his massive amount of carries. I think he had 77 receptions last year. We saw, 2 years ago, we were like, okay, he has all these carries, all this red zone work, a ton of yards. Can he put together receptions? Showed us last year that he can. He also showed us that his production did not dip when they traded for Amari Cooper, and if anything, it got better. So don't look at the Amari Cooper signing and be like, whoop, there goes Zeke. Nope, Zeke is still a fantastic pick. Zeke, of course, has, his off-the-field issues that he always seems to be in, but assuming he doesn't get suspended, then he's going to finish as a high-end running back 1. Tony Pollard is there and could take away some receptions, but Zeke has one of the most, if not the most, secured workloads in the league. I think I would put a few guys a little bit ahead of him, and guys that are higher on this list I'd put ahead of him, but one of the most secured workloads in the league. So you want to take Zeke, honestly, anywhere in the top 5, go for it, but I have him projected as the 5th highest scoring player, 4th highest scoring. Speaking of secure workloads, Christian McCaffrey, 250 carries, a little under 1,150 yards, 7.3 touchdowns, but the receptions, man, 88 receptions, 788 yards, and 6.1 receiving touchdowns. So you are looking at, 13 and a half total touchdowns, good for 362 fantasy points. We do see a jump there from Zeke to McCaffrey. CMC does not have the same carry upside as the other high-end running backs. I think I might scale back his projection a little bit on the carries, but even if he hits this, he does not have 300 carry upside. Zeke, for sure, could hit 300, 320 carries. McCaffrey's not going to get that many carries. They don't want to use McCaffrey in that way. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying that they don't want to use him in that way. They'd rather give some of those carries as receptions, which for fantasy purposes, we prefer. Every single time, if you said, hey, would you rather give him a carry or a target? The target. 100% of the time, you'd rather have the target. Because not only do you get points for the target, but they also typically come with higher yardage. The thing with McCaffrey, even when I say, he doesn't have the same carry upside, it's that weekly reception floor that makes him a great first-round pick. And, honestly, it's the game flow. He's game script proof. He is the perfect game script proof running back. Game's close, playing 100% of snaps. They get up big, well, he's just going to get more carries, and they likely score touchdowns since they're up big. Oh, they're down a ton? Well, now he's going to have one of his 10, 11, 12 reception games. So I love Christian McCaffrey again this season, and it would not shock me even a little bit if he finished the top overall running back in fantasy. Number 3 in the projections is my boy, David Johnson, 275 carries for a little under 1,175 rushing yards, 8.4 rushing touchdowns, and a lot of receptions this year. 84 receptions for 809 yards, another 5.8 receiving touchdowns, good for 367 fantasy points. Some of you might be surprised that DJ has this high of a projection, but you really shouldn't be. Cliff Kingsbury wants to set the record for the most plays per game in the history of the NFL, and they added a quarterback who fits that pace-up offense perfectly. Last year, David Johnson finished as the running back 9. Okay, that's when they had like the worst offense in the league. They struggled to score touchdowns, and they refused to use DJ in the passing game. They just ran him up the gut a bunch of times. Horrible. Absolutely pathetic. Pathetic coaching for the Cardinals last season. It will not be the same this season. This season, they're going to run more plays, they're going to score more touchdowns, and they've said they're going to feature David Johnson in the passing game and get him in space, which is how you use David Johnson. I'm all in on DJ this season. I highly recommend you do the same. An injury is the only possible way he does not finish in the top 5. Next, at the number 2 spot, we've got Saquon Barkley, 255 carries for 1,281 rushing yards, 11.2 rushing touchdowns, plus another 84 receptions for 714 yards and 2.8 receiving touchdowns. Good for 367 fantasy points. Just edged out David Johnson when we look at the decimal points, which I didn't show, like I said. Saquon has Wayne Gallman, Rod Smith, and Paul Perkins behind him. So he's only going to come off the field to catch his breath. He's locked into every single down duties. And he's another guy who's game skip proof. They're up big somehow. Well, he probably scored the touchdowns. They're down. Well, here comes another one of his 10 reception games. So is it a positive to be on a bad offense? Never. Never, ever is it a positive for a running back to be on a bad offense. But at least he's going to score the majority of the touchdowns. Or at least the majority of the rushing touchdowns. And he'll have a few receiving touchdowns. He's going to be the most used player in the red zone. So on the rare occasion that they finally make it there, he's going to be featured. So even if they don't score that many touchdowns, he's still going to get his touchdowns. And at the number 1 spot, Alvin Kamara. And I am a little surprised by this. You guys know I said I was surprised by Travis Kelce at 8. I'm surprised that Kamara got the top projection. It's not because I think Kamara's bad. He's amazing. But he's only projected for 214 carries. You know, there are other running backs that are 60, 70, 80 more carries. But Kamara, come in, 214 carries for almost 1,100 yards, 13.2 touchdowns, 79 receptions for 723 yards, another 5 touchdowns. It's the touchdowns. The projected touchdown volume and the reception floor is the reason that he comes in with the highest projection. If you think about it, that makes perfect sense. I guess I just wasn't thinking about it in the proper way beforehand. I don't care that Zeke's going to have, 80 more carries. Because it's, okay, where are these carries coming? Do I want to carry inside the 5? Do I want to carry in the red zone, or do I want to carry at the 50? Maybe Alvin Kamara gets less carries between the 20s than other running backs. But I don't care about those carries, because unless you broke it for a touchdown, cool, you got a 5-yard run. It's only half a point. I don't care. Get Kamara off the field. You can use Latavius Murray sometimes between the 20s. I don't care. But when they get into the red zone, Alvin Kamara steps onto the field, and the dude scores touchdowns. So could he have 18, 19, 20 touchdowns this season? Yep. The projection has him in there for 18 touchdowns, and that's not unrealistic. So when you take that secured touchdown and red zone role, plus add on 80 receptions, listen, the dude only has to be around 1,000 rushing yards to come in as the top running back. Do I have him ranked as the top running back? No. And that's, I think, something I'm going to have to think about. And the difference between Saquon, David Johnson, and Kamara comes out to 3 points, which realistically is like 1 reception from any of them. You take that reception 20 yards, maybe like a reception and a half on the projection, but they're all very close, which is why you hear everyone say, take the dude you feel most comfortable with. But if you want to take Alvin Kamara at 1, go for it. That's what these projections say, that you can absolutely go for it. So that rounds out my top 10 projected players. Remember, if you want to see my full projections as a way to find sleepers, find some busts, head over to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Become a premium member of the website. It is the cheapest premium package in the industry. And it comes with more than enough information for you to dominate your leagues. Also remember, follow us on Twitter. We got those handles in the description box down below. And subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. If you don't feel like using the YouTube app because you don't want to use a bunch of data, then just go to iTunes, download the podcast when you're at your house using the Wi-Fi. This is exactly what I do. I'm going to the gym in like an hour. That's what I'm going to do with Matt Kelly's podcast. I'm going to download it at my house and listen to it at the gym. I'm not using data, and I don't have to use the YouTube app, which I don't really like that much. But we still want you guys to use whatever platform you feel comfortable with. So you like iTunes better, you like YouTube better, use whatever you feel like using. And with that, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, how about we hit that like button? How about we subscribe if we are new? And thanks for watching.